Well, this is a first.
Inspecting every corner of the ship finally tired her out.
She's curious. I'll give her that. Hunter, she's a child. What are we gonna do with her?
If you could call upon the seas to outclean your enemies, would you watch the innocent casualties? I bet you'd be safely at home.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to the 53rd ship boot busting episode of Mando Vision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Please give us a follow and do all that liking, clicking, those little hearts and all that good stuff. You can email the show at you can email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert, and if possible or so inclined, and listening on Apple Podcasts. Please give us those sweet 5-star reviews. They help us defeat the tyrannical algorithm that holds us down and is much like the Empire in that regard. Those reviews really go a long way. They help small independent podcasts like us to stand out and not get lost in the shuffle of all the other amazing podcasts that are out there in the world. But we think we do a pretty good job here, so we want to stand out and spread the word of what we're doing over here on Mandovision. Well, it's here. I mean, we just talked about the debut episode of The Bad Batch, and now we're back just a few days later to talk about episode 2. And yeah, there's a lot to kind of get into in this one. It's an episode. Listen, I'm going to save a lot of my main observations for the end of the show, where I can kind of get down into these things a little bit in more depth and detail. But a lot of stuff comes up in this episode that I definitely think is worth exploring and noting further into the show. So let's get into it. Let's go ahead and do the most important step for this podcast, which is strap on your buckets. Let's go.
What is this?
That would be debt.
Let's get into it. Season 1, Episode 2 of The Bad Batch. This is Cut and Run. Its original air date today, May 7th, 2021. The plot of this episode: The Bad Batch visit an old contact. Directed by Stuart Lee, written by Gersimaran Sandhu. I hope I said your name correctly. With Matt Mensch. My penmanship is not good on this. Mishnevitz as a story editor. Matt Mishnevitz as story editor. Our main cast, once again, D. Bradley Baker doing all the heavy lifting in this. Michelle Ang as Omega. Kara Pifko as Sue. That's the main one we'll go with today. Again, D. Bradley Baker doing so much heavy lifting on this episode. It's out of bounds how much work he's doing on here. All right, this is an episode. I mean, we're basically picking up where we left off with the team. Escaping from Camino after Crosshair goes after them, and this episode slows the pace down a little bit. After that 70-minute action-packed episode, and kind of allows our team to kind of collect themselves and figure out what their next move is going to be. As was hinted at the end of the first episode, they go to an old contact of theirs on J19, which I guess J19, and we learn is Seleucami, a planet that we've been to many times over the course of the Clone Wars. Several epic mainstream battles have taken place on that planet, and it is the home of Cut, a deserter clone who we originally met in Season 2 of the Clone Wars. If you're listening to our rewatch episodes of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, that episode will be coming up actually fairly soon. And I was, earlier in the week I was doing a look ahead on my episode chart, and I just happened to notice that one. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that one. That'll be an interesting one to revisit. And then, of course, today, this new episode drops and cuts in it. I was like, oh, well, there you go. All right. So kind of more motivation to touch base back with that episode. So our team lands on Seleucami, and it's Omega's first experience with a different planet, a different environment than Camino. Camino is a very, very much a planet where you want to be in the interior. You want to be inside a lot. The weather, lots of storms, oceans. You're on big platforms, so she probably has not been out very much. So she's on a planet with land and a bright orange sun in the sky, and it's very nice, very interesting to watch her first interaction with that kind of environment, and sort of like the joy she takes at discovering all the new things, and in the opening clip we played from the beginning of the show, they talk about how she wore herself out covering every nook and cranny of the ship, and that was just going from Camino to Slugume. And so we know she's curious. We find that out very, very early on, and that is what we see a lot of as a journey from their ship's landing spot to Cut's house here on the planet. Um, I really liked that part about the character, like her sort of just unabashed fascination with everything, and her high level of interest in everything that's going on. On the trek, I also noted that there's an interesting conversation uh, when Echo hears that they're going to go meet up with a deserter, and Tech's response is, "Well, we're all deserters now." So I thought that was a really interesting perspective that they seem to have of their current environment of what's going on here. Uh, we haven't had a chance to dive too deeply into all the different characters in the Bad Batch, all the different members of the team, and their sort of thought process on what's happened to the galaxy at large, going from the Republic to the Empire, the turning against the Jedi, their Jedi generals at the end of the Clone Wars, and what it means for the galaxy moving forward. And so I'm hoping we'll get into some of those details later on. Like, if is this really what the members want to be doing? Obviously, like Crosshairs is the exception. Like, he is very much against what Hunter and the rest are doing, but we haven't really heard much about what Wrecker and Tech want. They sort of just seem to be following along at the moment. Probably because they see Hunter as like sort of the moral compass of the team, and so they gravitate towards his decisions. And his decisions in the past have been, uh, you know, I assume they trust him fairly well since they're all still alive, and it's probably due to his leadership, right? So we get to the house with Cut and Sue and their family, and there's a lot of interesting pieces of information in here. And there's a mention of Rex, our good friend Captain Rex, who was just there the day before, making a lot of chat about the behavioral chip, and and you have to wonder a little bit if the chip is something that was activated by Palpatine. You wonder, at least I wondered, did it have was it triggered by the clones hearing Order 66, and that was what activated the whole thing, or is there something else going on with the chips? Because clearly, Cut was not affected when Order 66 was executed, and it's again, he wasn't on the comm channels, so that you wonder if that was maybe part of the process. But and something we'll explore more in our post-show wrap-up. If you go back to some of the earlier, older canon, that is no longer counts. Uh, I wonder if some of the earlier generations of clone troopers maybe didn't have them. Now that seems unlikely because it seems like the Clone Wars has been pretty standardized as far as that goes. Because obviously Rex had the chip; he had to deal with the chip and Order 66 being given in that final season of the Clone Wars. When he struggled against that, and Ahsoka helped him come through that. So I just kind of wonder if they're going to explore that a little bit more fully. They've done a lot of nice stuff on the Clone Wars cartoon with the chip and talking about it a little bit, but there's still more information we could get. And I think they're kind of setting up some stuff here. And I mean, they're definitely setting up some stuff here. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more fully at the end of the episode. But, again, you're getting some nice nuggets here. And I was definitely curious about it. I'm curious what you all think about. Obviously, they're pushing the Hunter as a father figure, specifically to Omega, and the way he's watching her as she doesn't know how to play ball, she can't play catch. She has to try and figure it out. But obviously, she's a very smart kid, so she seems to be doing okay with that. And again, another piece of information comes out as Cut very bluntly asks Hunter, like, what's the deal with Omega?
All right, out with it. What's with the girl?
She's a defective clone. Like we are.
Not exactly.
What do you mean?
The Kaminoans don't create without a purpose. You all have one.
So, what's hers? It doesn't matter. She's just a kid.
Battling droids was easy compared to raising a child.
You have no idea what you're in for.
We didn't have a choice. Kamino wasn't safe anymore.
Well, neither is Seleucami.
Rex warned us of the storm that's coming.
Clone troopers have already started showing up.
I'm heading into town to book us a transport off-world.
We can take you where you need to go.
Nah, you're wanted men. It's too risky.
I have to do what's best for them.
All right, so now we kind of get the gist of the episode at the same time, but I'd like that beginning part of that conversation about the Kaminoans and what they're up to. Like, what is Omega's purpose? You know, we talked a little bit about, you know, who is she a clone of, what and why, and what's going on there. And again, that'll probably be a mystery that plays out through the course of this season, but it's definitely something for us all to consider moving forward, because it's gonna play a part. It 100% has to. That's just kind of like the way this stuff works, right? And again, we're going to talk about a little bit more about possibly what Omega's purpose is on the tail end of this episode. I'm going to do like a little bit of an observations and speculation segment, but that'll be after the episode recap. So we kind of know what's going on there. Seleucami is not safe. Rex warned Cut and his family that the clone troopers are moving in, and it's very different. And you know, it's interesting to note now that this show has flipped the script on us. You know, this is the rise of the Empire. This is the beginning of tyranny across the galaxy. And the characters that we rooted for during the Clone Wars are now characters we root against. And I refer to the clone troopers now, who are, you know, the beginnings of the stormtroopers. They are now enforcing the tyrannical will of Emperor Palpatine. And so we are getting a bit of a turn as far as who we are supposed to be rooting for on this show. Now, the Clone Wars spent a wonderful amount of time exploring and developing how, yes, they're clones. They are of the same genetic material, but their experiences and the things they've seen and done have all affected them very differently. So they are very different personalities. They are very different in the Force, as Master Yoda taught us back in Season 1. And I hope that they will continue to explore that through the lens of them now as enforcers of the Empire. But thus far through the 2 episodes, they are thugs of intergalactic space Nazis at this point. And that's a turn for us. And I don't know if that's a calculated one, so that we are now kind of like emotionally removed from the clones. So as we're watching our heroes in the Bad Batch, you know, just mow through them. You wonder if they're considering that, like, these at one point these were their brothers at one point. Now again, the Bad Batch is sort of the outcasts to begin with, so maybe they don't see it quite the same way, because they have been, you know, we saw how they were picked on and how they were viewed by other quote unquote regs in the first episode. So their point of view may be a little bit different, but I suspect at some point we're gonna link back up with Rex, and you have to kind of wonder if he has a very different perspective on this situation than Hunter and the rest of the Bad Batch has. And so I look forward to that exploration. All right, so now we transition to Cut and Hunter heading into town. Got to get some passage off-world immediately before more clones arrive. And what I like about this scene is it can't be easy for Cut. I mean, and you notice, like, pay attention to the way he moves and the way he turns his head and pulls his hat down, you know, as clone troopers are walking past. Because, I mean, he's the man who has the face of the guy underneath that helmet. And you know, that does come up later in the episode, but it's very interesting to be sort of surrounded by people who look exactly like you, and but to them you are considered a deserter, a wanted man, and you would imagine the Empire looks on that much more badly, less favorably so than maybe the New Republic would have. And again, I think we're going to talk about more about that when we get to Cut's debut episode on the Clone Wars coming up, because obviously, like, Rex has a struggle with that, and again, we'll talk about it on that specific episode. But I think it's a really subtle thing that they do in this episode where cut again, like he said, he's pulling his hat down. He kind of turns his head away from the oncoming troopers so that they don't notice him. Yeah, this is and Hunter. Again, Hunter's different enough that he doesn't seem to be doing the same things. There's enough difference in Hunter's facial features that it's not quite obvious that he's a clone because he is a defective one. But not the case for Cut. And I want to play this scene here because it talks a little bit. It's Cut and Hunter talking about the idea of being able to lay low and to avoid detection by this new empire that they don't seem to want to have anything to do with. And you get a little bit of that, and then it's going to go into what's going on with the with booking passage off world, because again, interesting stuff in here that I was like, my ears perked up when I heard a certain word, and you'll know what I mean in just a second. But let's go ahead and we'll check this scene out right now. Here we go.
So, where will you and your family go next? I suppose find a remote piece of land on a distant planet. That's all we really need. That's the key to not being found? You want to know how to disappear? Put being a soldier behind you and make a new life for yourself.
All right. So that's pretty good information, right? But again, this is the Bad Batch, and I don't think we're going to watch them become farmers, out in on the Outer Rim anywhere. That's not what this show's going to be about. They're going to get drawn into the conflict. Something's going to happen. Obviously, they have to still figure out what's going on with Crosshair. Are they going to go back and try to help him? Seems like that might be the case. Again, we have that mention of Rex and the inhibitor chips, and obviously Rex is up to something. So we have to explore that and talk about that a little bit. All right, let's get to the second part of the conversation. Here we go.
What do you want?
I need to book passage on the next shuttle out of here.
Those credits won't do you any good without a chain code. New galactic policy.
My what?
Your chain code.
Every citizen can exchange their invalid currency for Imperial credits, thanks to the generosity of the new Galactic Empire. The war is over. With peace comes opportunity and prosperity for all.
And there it is. Chain codes. A word we've been hearing since the first episode of The Mandalorian, and now we get some much needed context for when the heck did this all come into play. It is a device of the Empire for tracking individuals. I mean, obviously we've inferred all that from The Mandalorian, but now we see where it started from. Now we kind of get the whole picture, a more full picture of why chain codes were put in place and how they're being used by the Empire. And Tech talks about it a little bit later in the scene in the episode. I think I'm going to let that scene play out when it comes up, chronologically speaking. But I heard this and I was like, oh, chain codes, huh? All right, cool. So a concept that was introduced to us in The Mandalorian comes into play right here in episode 2 of The Bad Batch. And we see that the chain codes have been there the entire time as part of the dawn of, from the dawn of the Empire, basically. So you would imagine all of our characters have a chain code attached to them. And that's another interesting facet of the Imperial control of the Imperial system that's in place. And I really liked hearing that. I thought it was really neat. And an interesting way to kind of make another connection to The Mandalorian, the show on which this whole podcast is based on. So when we cut back to Cut's home, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. But we go back to the homestead of Cut and his family. We still see Omega playing with the kids, playing the ball. The ball goes out beyond the fence, and the kids are like, let's leave it, we'll come back for it later on. Omega, not knowing that the fence is there to protect her, decides that she's going to be the one to go get the ball, and attracts the attention of a Nexu, who, again, I'm sure you all recognized the distinct look and the distinct sound of the Nexu, and we saw this in Attack of the Clones, so always a nice callback when you get some stuff from the films, and a more, again, I love it when they connect those dots, and they bring things back that we know or that we're familiar with. It's always fun and exciting. So I like that. But in between, as the Nexu begins to stalk Omega, we get the conversation with Hunter and Tech about the chain codes. And this is what I wanted to play for y'all before they have to go rescue Omega. So check this out. This is interesting stuff here.
It appears all public transport is now restricted without chain codes.
Which Cut can't sign up for. He'll be arrested when they discover he's a deserter.
The next shuttle leaves in a few hours. Codes or no codes, we need to be on it.
There you go. And the cry for help is where we have to stop, as Omega's gotten herself into a little bit of trouble, and this is where Sue gets to shine a little bit, and Hunter as well, as he rushes out to protect Omega from the Nexu, and Sue just starts blasting away that thing from the rooftop. It's pretty awesome, pretty awesome shot by her, and a nice little scene there. And then this is where we get like the strongest sort of reaction from Hunter to Omega, and the way Cut has to sort of insert himself to be like sort of like the more understanding and proper father, and instead of Hunter's reaction, which is to chastise like he would a soldier, which I thought was interesting too.
What were you doing out there? Do you realize you could have been killed?
Easy. She's not a soldier. Are you hurt? Oh, let's take a look here.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get the ball. I didn't know.
You're safe. That's all that matters. Come on.
Hey, kid. You alright?
She'll be fine.
This is a fascinating glimpse for our characters, for Hunter in particular, of what life could be like if he can put the soldiering behind him. You see that Cut, again, they talk about it in Cut's episode, like he wants something more, something better for himself, and that's why he leaves the Grand Army of the Republic. And we see that the way that he has completely changed. He's not a soldier anymore. I mean, he's very much a father. He knows how to protect his kids and his family, and that's his priority. But soldiering is no longer his business, and he seems to have no regrets about that whatsoever. He will help his fellow clones. He will help his fellow brothers. I think he still views them all as brothers, in one sense or another. But he has chosen a different path for himself. And again, I'm going to foreshadow our episode about that. But we have talked about it on our rewatch of the show. The clones are a slave army. This is the downward spiral that the Republic finds itself on without even being aware of it. And so that is at the heart of the clone army and the dilemma that the Jedi face, that they are using a slave army to fight their war, and it's a war they shouldn't even be involved in. And again, we'll talk about that more in depth on that particular episode of the show. But again, the machinations of the dark side, the way the Jedi were completely blindsided by their own actions, thinking they were defending the peace, defending the Republic, when they were following the wrong path the entire time. It's all fascinating stuff, and I love it so much. And I like this scene, again, Cut, showing what the type of father that he is, and the type of life he has assumed for himself. That's very different than that of his fellow clones and his brothers, and Hunter and Echo and Tech and even Wrecker seeing this. I wonder how much it will impact them. Hunter in particular, as he seems to be the character who will be the sort of foster father for Omega. Interesting stuff to consider. So after this moment with the Nexu, Hunter realizes he's not cut out for this. This isn't what he's all about, and so he wants Cut and Sue to take Omega with her. She shouldn't be with them. If she were to be with a family, it would be better for her. So Hunter is essentially taking away Omega's voice and her choice, her right to choose her own path, which again is sort of a dangerous path to go down. And you'd think a clone would know better as someone who was forced to fight a war that they had no choice in. And you know, again, so there's a little bit of resonance there, but he doesn't realize, he thinks he's helping her. He thinks he's making the right decision for her, but he shouldn't be making the decision for her, I think is what we need to kind of like hammer home at this point. It's also when Omega's on the ship and she's kind of still shaken by what happened, and she removes that kind of the Kaminoan headband that she wears when she was with them on Kamino, and for the first half of this episode, and it's sort of like, I feel like it's a symbolic move on her part, But there may be more to it than that as we sort of dive into her backstory about who she is and what she's been bred for. And so I'm very curious how that kind of plays out. It's also at this point that we get Echo and Tech planning how they're going to get those chain codes, how they're going to get Cut and his family off planet, and themselves off planet at the same time. And the plan basically involves getting the ship taken, because all ships are being taken to an impound lot, basically. And just like the people who are being chain coded, all the ships are being tagged, and the Empire wants information and details on everybody, and wants to know everybody's business and everything about everybody's business. So their plan is to get taken, so they get taken into the impound lot, and then once they're in the impound lot, they can infiltrate the security office and get the blank discs they need so that they can imprint their own custom chain codes that will totally be viable and be authenticated when checked. So that's sort of the plan, and it seems to be going off without a hitch until they're being picked up, and they're unaware that Omega's on the ship with them, and Hunter starts to freak the hell out. So it's at this point that Hunter and Wrecker and have to take the family. They're gonna take them to the spaceport and hope that Tech's part of the plan will be able to be delivered on. And this is when you get some interesting action stuff as we hit here into the third act of our story. As they enter town too, you will notice Wrecker bumping his head once again on some piping that's just above it, kind of continuing the narrative theme of stormtroopers bumping their heads on things, kind of connecting the dots to a goof from episode 4. So things are happening pretty fast and furious at this point in the episode. A entire detachment of clone troopers is coming into the impound lot, into the spaceport, basically, at the town Seleucami is based. They're not quite on lockdown yet, but there's a ton of clone troopers there. It's going to make it really hard for Echo and Tech to move around and get into all the places they need to deliver the chain codes to the family. So Omega takes them, and she's going to be the one to deliver them. And that gets her into a little bit of trouble, too, which Wrecker comes to her aid, and then he runs into a little trouble, too. And I like this part of the show so much, I have to play it for y'all.
Where you going? Show me your chain code, citizen.
Sure, I got it right here. Oh, right, must be in this hand.
And then that's where the trouble begins, and the epic battle begins here for the remainder of the episode. And it's really cool. I think it's a really nice bit of showmanship on the part of Wrecker. All right, the other part of this I need to play here is that as Omega arrives just in the nick of time to give the chain codes to Cut and his family, she makes the comment like, "Hey, there's 5 instead of 4. What up with that?" And this is when Hunter has to tell her what he's done on her behalf. And so I want to play this scene real quick because it does factor pretty heavily into the final clip that we're going to play on the show. Here we go.
The extra chain code's for you, so you can leave with Cut and Sue.
Why? Did I do something wrong?
You need a family, kid. They're good people. They'll give you the life you deserve.
But I want to stay with you.
Quit holding up the line. You have to go, Omega. It's for your own good.
And there it is. There's Hunter making the decision for Omega, which is, not cool in the grand scheme of things. And there will be much to discuss about that moving forward as we sort of get into all the intricacies of what's coming ahead. What I want to talk about, well, it's not quite what I want to get into in these final moments just yet, because it's at this point, there's a lot of action going on. We have to kind of talk about all of that stuff, all this stuff going on. Echo's trying to get the boot, the clamp, the docking clamp off of their ship because they have to be able to make their own escape as well. You have Wrecker engaged with the troopers, and eventually Wrecker is gonna pull the clamp off apart because he is Wrecker and he has that kind of strength. He can just do that, and that was pretty fun to watch. Again, and Hunter comes to aid his brothers as they're making their escape, and again, they're mowing through these clone troopers. There's it's a fierce battle, but they are killing the other troopers. It's not everyone's on stun blasts. It's like no, they're putting shots right into the chest of their fellow clones, and again, it's sort of showing the sort of line of where they are. The clones are obviously on the side of the Empire, and the Bad Batch is on their own side, and they'll be damned if anyone's going to get in their way of saving themselves and getting out of there. Again, the action stuff is really, really good on there. I also like the scene where, as he's about to board the shuttle with his family, Cut is almost recognized by a clone for having the same face, like that thing he's been trying to avoid. But it was you had to look at this clone trooper, and it was face to face, and he's paying attention. Luckily, the commotion that the Bad Batch is causing it disrupts him, and he just is like, yeah, whatever, get on the ship, get out of here, you lousy bum, and yeah, and they're able to leave, and then our heroes, the Bad Batch, they're able to break away from the planet as well. What was interesting, I thought, was the lack of pursuit by the Empire at this point. Obviously, Cut and his family, they're on a a licensed, approved departure, so they're fine. But the Bad Batch just takes off, and there's no sort of again, no pursuit by any sort of ties. And you would think this Port Authority would have at least a couple TIE fighters at their disposal to sort of harangue anyone trying to leave without authorization, or to harangue anyone attempting to land without authorization. But apparently not. So a bit of a lapse in Imperial thought. But let's play this final clip here between Hunter and Omega as we close out this episode.
I know I made a mistake, and I have a lot to learn, but you don't have to get rid of me. I left Camino with you. This is where I want to be.
Tell you the truth, kid, I guess I've got a lot to learn too. If this is where you want to be, then this is where you'll stay.
Hey, alright. And there's our episode. That's it right there. Good stuff. A really solid episode. But there are some things in here that I wish they had explored a little bit more fully. We talked a little bit about those, and this is where I'm gonna get my observations and some of my speculations out right now. So I did feel that they sort of rushed this father-daughter relationship between Hunter and Omega. It didn't feel quite earned at the beginning of the episode. It feels more earned now at the end. You see that they're on that path to that relationship, but it didn't quite level out the way I wanted it to when the episode first started. It seemed like that was what they wanted us to feel already, and this episode picks up right where the last one left off. It's not like there's a time gap where maybe they have bonded with each other more fully. You start to see that bonding in this episode, and while I don't think the father-daughter relationship is complete at this point, like I said, they put them on the right path. I just think they sort of jumped the gun a little bit. The other thing I wanted to note was I think they have to be very, very careful with what they're doing with Hunter and Omega, because we just saw a father-son relationship play out on The Mandalorian, and I don't think they want to walk that path too closely. They have to differentiate their show enough from what we just saw on The Mandalorian as far as that relationship, that parent-child relationship goes. It's a great dynamic to explore, and this show will probably do a darn fine job of exploring that. But they have to work for it. They have to kind of get there first. They can't just yank us by the nose and get us to go on that path. It feels like this episode ends in the right place, but it kind of starts like it's halfway there. And I brushed up against that. That's probably the best way to put that. And again, they do have to be careful, because we did just see that on The Mandalorian. And again, we also speculate on this podcast that was part of the reason why there was a delay in the Obi-Wan show. Is we felt like, we openly wondered if maybe there was an Obi-Wan, young Luke thing that was going to echo what we were seeing in the Mandalorian. So they got to be very, very careful here with what they're doing. This is one of the things you got to be careful of when you're in a shared universe. There's a lot of great story ideas and a lot of great opportunities to explore those fun ideas, but you got to be careful not to repeat yourself too often. That's not a good thing. And again, the second thing I want to bring up, we talked about it a little bit before, but the clone troopers now as the bad guys, they seem to be devoid of the personalities that we got to know from them. They just sort of seem like jerk butt stormtroopers, just enforcing this will, and they seem to have complete autonomy to do whatever they want at this point. And that is interesting, and I hope it's something they will explore more. Again, I mentioned it before. I'm curious if it has something to do with the inhibitor chip. If flipping that chip and activating them in that regard has sort of muted their personalities, and now it's amped up, like the way Crosshair was amped up with his chip, and now they're just super hyper loyal enforcers of the Empire and Palpatine's will. So I'd like to see some more of that, and I'm very, very curious of that. Which goes into observation number 3. What is Rex up to? He's there talking with the Cut in before our heroes get there, talking about the inhibitor chip. Is Rex trying to figure out a way to save his brothers? Is there some sort of default shut-off switch that would negate the inhibitor chip and allow his brothers to choose their path, to choose their own fate and their own destiny? Do they want to be a part of this empire? Are any of them racked with guilt for killing their Jedi generals in Order 66? I'm very curious if this gets more explored, if this gets more fully developed, because there are some lingering questions about that. Like I said, I mean, is it like Order 66 and boom, no personality, just diehard loyalist to the Empire? Very curious if they'll go into that a little bit more fully once we end up meeting up with Rex, which I definitely feel like his name being invoked in this show definitely thinks we're going to get there. There's a lot of Rex's story that we don't know just yet, but between Clone Wars and when we see him again in Rebels. So it would make a certain amount of sense that he's going to spend some of his time trying to help as many of his fellow clones as he can escape from the tyranny that is the Empire. I mean, now again, they're even more so a slave army now, because if the inhibitor chip is suppressing their personalities and their freedoms, they are even more of a mindless slave army than they were before, and that'll be interesting to explore. And then number 4, again, something we've talked about since the first episode. What is Omega bred for? What is her purpose? Cut openly wonders about it in this episode. It merits discussion. What I wondered, and I share with you wonderful people who are listening to this podcast right now. I have, over the course of this show, I have evoked a lot of lore from what is called the Legends, continuity. The Legends, what is now the Legends canon. The old expanded universe that has gone away since Disney purchased the company. I sort of got struck by an idea today that evokes the old Legends canon, the old Legends continuity, the old Legends history. And I sort of wondered if that was maybe the direction they were going to go. And so let me explain. I'm talking vaguely here, but hear me out. In the first episode of this show, Tarkin is evaluating the clones. They obviously want to get to a point where it is a conscripted army of people that they can control via whatever methods that they choose to. A clone army that is bred for one sole purpose is probably no longer needed, and as Tarkin points out, also very, very expensive. So maintaining the clone armies, paying the Kaminoan cloners to make more generations after generation of clone troopers, not only costly, but to the Emperor's eyes, to Tarkin's eyes, not money well spent. And I think Tarkin also considers the clones to be dangerous because of their genetic history, who they are cloned from. So Tarkin has his reservations. We are aware of that. He wants to shift to a conscripted army, to recruitment and to forced service and things, conscription, if you will. And that's great, but exactly how do you phase out a clone army? How do you get rid of a clone army? You can't just kick them out and send them out into the galaxy. These are men who are trained in the art of war, in combat, in how to kill enemies with supreme efficiency, and kicking them out, sending them out into the galaxy would potentially make them enemies of the Empire right away. And I'm not discounting the accelerated aging of the clone troopers. That's definitely a factor to consider as well. But still, even with the accelerated aging, you can't just throw them out there in the galaxy and hope they don't come back to bite you in the butt, right? You got to do something about that. So, what if, again, pulling from the lore of the old Star Wars stuff, specifically the Kathy Travis clone books, the 501st and all the Omega Squad stuff, all of her clone Mandalorian books. What if Omega is part of a bioweapon designed to target the genetic offspring of Jango Fett and basically wipe out all the clones in one fell swoop? If Omega's a female clone of Fett, she has that genome in her already, and they could have weaponized her in a sense to be used against the other clones. And again, if you're the Emperor, if you're Tarkin, you want them out. Again, you're not gonna, if you're Tarkin or the Emperor, you're not just gonna dismiss these dudes and go, hope they go settle and start farming on Felucia somewhere, or anywhere else on wild space or in the Outer Rim. No. Because you don't value them as people, as individuals. They are slaves. They were tools for your war, and that's all they are in their eyes. So you just eliminate them, and there's no consequence there because they don't view them as real people. So there's no moral or ethical quandary as far as Palpatine and Tarkin and all these other muckety mucks and high up in the Empire are concerned. So I wonder if that is part of Omega's purpose. That she was designed to be the vessel of their doom, or she is the person who would be the architect of their doom and demise. And so I'm very, very curious if that will be the path that and the precarious nature that would put them in, if that were to be discovered. How Hunter would feel about that, how Wrecker and Tech and Echo and all of them would feel having this person in their midst who could potentially destroy them all. That's where I'm going with it. That's what I'm wondering if they'll do. I like that path. Bring back the Karen Travis stuff. I think I said Kathy Travis earlier. I apologize. It's Karen Travis. I love that aspect. The whole it was Fett's genome came into play. It was a whole thing. I won't go down that road here, but I would not be surprised if that was the material they were pulling from for that. I think that would be very interesting, very fascinating. And what do you think? Am I barking up the wrong tree? Am I way off base? What do you think Omega's for? What do you think Omega's purpose is? This is the question that Cut asked Hunter, and we have to ask ourselves. And I think Omega was designed with nefarious purposes. I mean, her name's Omega, the Alpha and the Omega. Jango is the Alpha. She is the Omega. She is the end of the line. That's where I'm going with that. Let me know what you think. You know where to find me. Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for the love and support. I'm always continually blown away by the feedback, by the interest that people have in the podcast. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Star Wars is largely responsible for making me the person that I am today. It's my favorite thing in the world. It's my favorite thing in life. I love Star Wars so much, and doing this podcast is sort of the realization of a dream, is just to have an avenue where I can talk about Star Wars all day, and it's so much fun. You know, I've been doing podcasting, gosh, for like 6 or 7 years now, and I just got around to doing my own Star Wars show. Well, we're here now and we're doing it, and I'm having a blast. And I want to once again I want to thank all of you for listening, because it means the world to me that we're doing this together. I'm not alone on this journey, and there's a lot of us out there. And I hope you're enjoying the show as much as I'm enjoying making it. Thank you so very, very much. Remember, we are on all your favorite podcasting platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, and so many more. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and you can take the time to give us a 5-star review, I thank you in advance. They are so important to getting the word out about what we're doing here on the Mandovision podcast. It's the best. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. We also accept likes from people who you have life debts to, people you're in blood feuds with, and all your neighbors' pets. Those are also, that's a big demographic of ours, is your neighbors' pets. We have a lot of listeners of the 4-legged variety, and we're okay with that. We are okay with that. All right, I'm getting out of here. Again, this is the Mandovision podcast. Nargai Tom, your friend, your host, and I can't wait to talk to you all next week. On Monday, we are dropping another episode of Season 2 of The Clone Wars, and then we'll be back here on Friday breaking down the next episode of The Bad Batch, and I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
You expect me to search the galaxy for the home of this creature and deliver it to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.